Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Osoyoos Committee of the Whole, May 13th, 2025 at 9 a.m. in Council Chambers. So first off is could we have approval, please, of the agenda? Councillor King, Councillor Bennett, all in favor? Thank you. And the adoption of some minutes. That would be the Committee of the Whole minutes of April the 22nd, 2025. Councillor Chong, Councillor Poderica, all in favor. Thank you very much. And we will now move on to petitions and delegations. And our first one today is on hazard, risk, and vulnerability ABS analysis project. And it's presented by the RDOS, Jillian Geitz. Is it Jillian that's going to do it? Now, and I see that there are several of you here. Could you introduce everyone, please? Thank you very much.
So good morning, and thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Deborah Jones-Middleton. I'm the the manager of protective services for the regional district. And with me today, we have Con Duong and Jillian Cease, who is our hazard, risk, and vulnerability analysis staff. And then we also have with us our emergency program coordinator, Gilbert Chan. So, and this is our project team for the project. So I'll go from here.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. So as you can see, we are very excited that this project is embraces one region working together. We have engaged the Osoyoos Indian Band, Lower Similkameen Indian Band, Upper Similkameen Indian Band, Penticton Indian Band, the town of Osoyoos, the town of Oliver, the city of Penticton, the district of Summerland, the village of Karameas, and the town of Princeton as well, all engaged in this project with us. So we're very excited about that. Thank you. Of course, we're going to be looking at the significant environmental hazards, impacts of climate change, the population growth that's happened, which is significant in this area. And we're guided by the Emergency and Disaster Management Act of BC, as well as the United Nations Sendai Framework and the DRIPA. So those are guiding this project as we move forward. We will look at the hazards within the region. So we'll look at various different hazards. There's 57 that the province identifies as required to be looked at, but we will also be working with community and determining if there's other hazards that we should be looking at. We will look at what is the risk of those hazards happening in our region and in the municipalities specifically, the First Nations specifically, as well as the electoral areas. And then we'll look at what is the vulnerability of the communities, the people, the infrastructure, what kind of resources do we have that will support us in if there's an event that happens that will actually mitigate those risks and vulnerabilities. And many of us think, okay, what are the risks or the hazards? Wildfire, flooding, landslides in this area are, of course, prevalent and come first of mind. But there are many other hazards, next slide, thank you, that we would consider as well, like food source interruption or food security as well, drought, transportation route interruption. Those are just some of the 57 hazards that we'll be looking at and talking to communities about. So we'll be identifying those hazards and evaluating the risks, assessing the vulnerabilities, and identifying the gaps. So what is not here? What isn't working for us? What can we possibly do about that? And maybe we can have shelf-ready projects that when grant funding comes available, we can just go, right, and get that project going. We also, I identify those, as I said, those resources that we already have in place, police, fire, ambulance, just top of mind. LSIB just put in some infrastructure that is watching the mountains and the potential slide situation. Those kinds of resources that are already existing Plus, we have, natural resource groups in the First Nations that are looking after some of the infrastructure, the land out in the rural areas as well. And of course, is an opportunity for regional collaboration that I'm really excited about here. We want to improve community and regional resilience. Our project team, as I introduced you, they will be focusing on planning and facilitating this and supporting the project and preparing the final reports. The advisory committee is made up of all the emergency program coordinators in the region, and they are actually ensuring that we haven't got any gaps in the process, that we're making sure we address all the needs for each of the communities. And they're also helping us bring people together to help us with that information. And we're not just looking at subject matter experts, although they are very important to this process. We're also reaching out to the public and going to public events. So anything that you're having in your community, our HRVA's people would be happy to come down and participate in the community event and get feedback from the residents that live here and their experiences, because sometimes they have great insights as well. And with the sub-regional committees will be made up of community members and subject matter experts, which we will look to community to help us identify some of those people. Next slide, thank you. We also looked at the region as a whole and tried to figure out how to build the subcommittees. And so we did that electoral G, B, and H together with, of course, LSIB, USIB, and the village of Karameas and the town of Princeton. So that's the Similkameen Valley. For Osoyoos, the town of Oliver, electoral area A and C is the Suiyus area, and with the Osoyoos Indian Band, right? And then for the Sinclair area is the city of Penticton, the district of Summerland, the Penticton Indian Band, and electoral areas D, I, E, and F. And then we kind of tried to look at it geographically, how they were suited to each other in the landscape as well. So, next slide. This project was built into 5 phases. We have completed phase 1, which is building the charter for the project and making sure we had a good plan to move forward with. And then we're now in phase 2, where we're starting to collect the data and hazard identification. And we're also building and finalizing our subcommittees for each area. And then phase 3 will be from January to April of 2026. We will be doing the risk assessment and prioritization. So what is the risk that those things are going to happen, and how are they going to impact the people, infrastructure, etc. And then phase 4, we will be drafting the final project reports for each community. So Osoyoos will have its own hazard, risk, and vulnerability analysis. And then they will also see the regional analysis as well. We will also provide to the community all the data that we've collected on behalf of the community to ensure that you have that at your fingertips. And then phase 5 will be the finalization of the report, and we will come back to you and present that report and those findings.
Well, thank you very much, Deborah. Really appreciate it. And Deborah also presents at the regional district quite often, so we get updates on this quite often. Certainly, it's the best thing about this is that the resources are being shared amongst all of us in the regional district, and working together is really important. So can I just see if there's any questions
Yes,
from council? Thank you very much. Does anybody have anything? No, we're good because go ahead, Councillor King.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just look at your presentation. You're not taking it out to the public consultation till your last phase, just before your report?
That will be on the draft report. We are doing public consultation throughout the whole process. So like I said, all community events. We'll be hosting separate events as well. And to make sure that we're getting feedback, we're also going to be doing a survey. So people who want to do some online things would be able to do that as well.
So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you again on this issue. And thank you and your team for coming today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for having it.
Okay. Next on our list, we have a petition, a presentation from Solvita on watering restrictions and and can I just point out that this is 5 minutes that we have available for this?
That's all we need.
One page.
Perfect.
We'll be quick.
Thank you very much, Martin and Frank.
C3 Industries is Frank Zanfleet, who's our irrigation specialist. So we've been working together with Solivita to try and obviously reduce a lot of the water use that they have. And what they've gone through is they've actually redone about $250,000 worth of their landscaping now to get rid of all the overhead sprays that are in all of their plant beds. So what they've done is they've all gone to the drip irrigation, which is all underground, reduces any waste to evaporation and all that fun stuff. But they've spent quite an exorbitant amount of money to be a part of this project that we're trying to get people to do here in town. And it's just what they're asking for. Basically, it's just an opportunity to extend some of their watering because we've planted over 900 new plants in that property now. And what they're asking for is just to be able to get the same allowances that they had last year, just until the plants get an opportunity to establish themselves so they don't lose all the money that they've spent. Some of the issues that we're running into still, because 17, 18 years ago, the irrigation that uses pop-ups in the lawns was tied in with landscape beds. So now you're unfortunately having to do both, which we don't do anymore. Those should always be separated. But at this point in time, we have to deal with an existing system, which would be ridiculous to try to replace. But what we're asking for is just a little bit of an extension and the same allowances that they had last year so that the plants have an opportunity to establish. Frank has some quick numbers for you to kind of help you understand what they've actually gone through and done.
On these 140 beds, they ripped apart. They had the average between 2 and 4 spray heads per bed. So averaging 3, that's 420 spray heads. We removed them all, and the spray head gives out between 0.3 and 0.6 gallons per minute, which equates to 126 gallons a minute over 18, 19 zones. We put in 850, 900 drip heads emitters, which the emitters emit 1 gallon per hour. So therefore you do the gallons per hour and you're down to using 14, 15 gallons a minute over the 18 zones. So they spent over $250,000 to reduce their water consumption and to keep the plants alive. They're also, their systems aren't like a home system where it's got 4 or 5 zones. They're 18 zones, 10 zones, like huge controllers that to run them all in a 4-hour window is not going to be adequate water going to your trees and your grasses and these new plants that we put in. So last year you gave them an exemption and you still only allowed each zone to be used the once or twice or 3 times, whatever the regulations are at the moment. But we divided them in half and we did it over 4 days. So we ran half the controller on the one day, then the second half on the second day with the extra hours, and it was sufficient. So they're just asking for the same as they had last year. They did their part to reduce their gallonage from 126 down to 18, 15. So they're just asking for, the same respect back, please.
Well, thank you very much for that information. We don't make any decisions today, but we have certainly written down what you've said, and we will look at it. And we just want to say thank you for doing the work and realizing that all of us need to be involved in conserving water and using it wisely. So I'll just check and see if anybody has any. Go ahead, Councillor King.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a comment, you're not really asking to use more water, you just want the different time changes, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
The same as they had last year.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and we will eventually get back once we deal with all the other things that we have.
The C3 will not set a controller to overdo what the town has done until we have it in writing.
Okay.
So like whether we're doing residential or these bigger properties. we just won't do it, so.
Great.
But it's just also just so you know that there's a bit of a time crunch because the plants are in the ground.
Well,
So that's
yeah.
all I'm gonna say.
we know fortunately the weather's cooler and we've had a little bit of rain. That really helps.
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Thank you
Ask
very much.
question.
Sorry, go ahead, Jim.
You want this like for the whole summer, or just for the month, or?
I think just for a couple of months is all they're asking for until the plants have an opportunity to establish their root systems. So we just need it for a couple of months.
So if we put that in writing, 60 days would be sufficient?
Believe so. Does that make sense? Is that what, was that what it was last year?
That
I
was,
think they're.
it was all for the year.
Oh,
I think
so
it was
they
for
did
the whole year
it
last
special.
When they went to the restrictions to 2 days a week.
Yeah.
They lost extra water, so they were still able to do it. Because we won't set, like I said, we won't set.
Or whatever it was last year would be great.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh, okay, Counselor Chong has a question.
No, just to add on to Councilor King's point, we're looking at drought conditions this summer. It may be pretty bad, so I think at the very least 90 days, just because again, with all those plants, new plants, I want to make sure they're viable and they don't die. Also with those plants, are they climate appropriate or?
yeah, absolutely. One of the things they had done is, I'll give you a quick rundown. We gave them a proposal 4 years ago. They didn't like the proposal, went with the Vancouver architect, way overplanted and used all kinds of species that don't belong here. So we're also working with things like Bartlett Tree Services to trying to educate not only the landscape designers, but also the people who are building these larger properties to stop using plants. They bring in flowering cherries, which can completely wipe out our entire cherry crop here in the Okanagan. They use flowering cherries still for landscaping. It happened in Creston. It took out the whole cherry crop. So we're trying to educate a lot of the people on what kind of plants to use. We do work closely with Sagebrush Nursery, who uses a lot of the native species, things that are drought tolerant, that require less water, that establish quicker, so that we can all do our part to reduce the plants. And we're also getting into doing subsurface drip irrigation for lawns now. So any new installs, I don't do spray heads anymore. It's all underground. So there's no wastage on evaporation. There's no wastage on anything at all. It just feeds the root system and it reduces the water from 126 to 15. So we're trying to do the best that we can. And sometimes our clients just, they need a little bit of help.
No, that's amazing. So thank you. And it's really positive to see properties like Solivita taking those steps. And so it's I support this.
And I know that Okanagan Basin Water Board has a long list of plants that are appropriate for this area. And that's available for sure, but you probably already know that. Yeah, great. Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
And then we have Strata KAS 2660, a request for an exemption, and that would be John Lamb.
Right.
Great, thank you.
You know what, and I like just Casa del Lago. Anyways, thank you very much, Madam, Your Worship, Council, and Administration. I'm John Lamb. I'm with Brian Karen, and we're here representing Casa del Lago. Property covered under 185 water and sewer accounts. The annual sewer bill for 185 owners is $279,720. Yet we only get the same amount of time to water as a single account of 1,512. We're somewhat disappointed to see this year's bylaw that we will be limited to 4 hours of watering per day rather than the 6 from last year. Even at 6 hours, we suffered damage in many areas. At least 4 mature trees that were important to provide shade to nearby units were lost. The complete loss of over 100 square meters of lawn, which has to be ripped out. Stress on various plants and lawn areas throughout the complex that have reduced their viability for this year. In our opinion, the current bylaws regarding water use unfairly treat large multi-account properties when compared to single account lots in Osoyoos. We have 477 spray heads and about 25 drip lines. This represents 2.6 spray heads per account holder in Casa del Lago. A single account lot is being given 4 hours on each watering day when in fact they could probably get by with 20 minutes with 4 spray heads. Our property has 4 controllers, and at one point for a 4-hour watering, that means the controllers are running for 12 minutes. That's 12 minutes of water being delivered to the lawns and trees. We calculate with 4 hours of water use, we'll use 1,060 liters for each 185 account holders in a week. A conscientious single account lot, we estimate will use 2,270 liters per week based on a 20-minute running, 3 times a week. For us to get allotment equal to the use of most conscientious single account users, we'd need more than 8 hours of watering a day. Now, we understand our need for reducing the water in our town, but we request that you make it a level playing field for multi-account and single account properties. An increase of just 6 hours to 6 hours, which is what we were given last year, would at least bring us back to last year and would be at least a 30% irrigation or savings on irrigation, even with the most conscientious single account user. On our end, we're also working with C3 to replace our plants with more sustainable, drought-resistant plants. We're also going to our owners this year to ask for update on our irrigation to make it more efficient, more drip lines, for example, and we're working with C3. We respectfully ask for a variance on our water restrictions this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamb. You heard what we said.
Oh, yeah,
the last
absolutely.
one, so the same thing applies. I'll just check and see if anybody has any questions on that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. I just want to echo the comments because that was a question I had for both presentations, but it's great to see you both address the fact that, there are steps we made to reduce the, replace the technology in terms of what we're irrigating, how we irrigate, as well as the understanding that, the plants that we had 25 years ago are very different than what works well in this environment now and the water needs that we have. So I do appreciate the improvements that are being made over time. It is a costly upgrade, but I do appreciate the efforts being made by both properties in terms of reducing their water needs. So thank you.
Thank you. Our owners are very understanding. They come from all over BC and they understand the water restrictions and the responsibility we have to make sure that we use it appropriately. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much
Thank
for your presentation, and we will certainly take note of your concerns.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we will now go on to staff reports and curbside recycling and contamination. Is that Mr. Risling, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I've mentioned several times over the past year about how important recycling is to our community and province and nation. And I've also indicated that we've been coming dangerously close to exceeding contamination within our recycling. And a few months ago, we did unfortunately exceed the requirements. So I guess this is a report of both good news and maybe concerning news. The good news is people are recycling. If nobody was recycling, we wouldn't have failed our audit. So still want to encourage people to do what they can. I think when people put material in a recycling bin, they have good intentions, but sometimes we put things in there that we shouldn't. And that's the topic of today. So ultimately, because we failed our audit, Recycle BC is basically mandating that we develop a plan to reduce those contaminants within the recycling bins. So we're going to be doing a lot of things, and we've already ran a lot of this by Recycle BC. They've done these audits in various municipalities and have a good information from which we can learn from. And so we are going to start proceeding, and we've already done a little bit of advertising, but we're going to ramp things up. So some of the big things identified in our audit so far are people throwing away their hard and soft cover books. I know that's one that's probably confusing because you see it's paper, but those cannot be recycled. People are throwing away ceramics, scrap metal, and textiles or clothing. And so those things contributed to our exceeding the requirements of BC Recycling. So our plan, education, I think, is one of the most important things. Again, I think people that are recycling are doing it out of good conscience, and they may be a little overzealous in what they're doing. So education is an important piece. We're also going to be training our recycling collectors, giving them a little bit more information. And this is a big one, enforcement. And I brought this up a couple times. One of the requirements of Recycle BC is to actually do audits. And what that basically entails is that we're going to be having staff actually going through recycle bins. So in the Tuesday morning, you're going to see some town staff out there randomly picking about 50 carts or so and doing an audit and doing kind of a report card. And so that's going to be somewhat unusual, but it is one of the requirements. And we're obviously going to be monitoring this and have to report these results quarterly to Recycle BC. So on the audits, because I think that's going to be the one that people are going to be potentially uncomfortable with. Again, we're going to do about 50 properties every time on garbage collection day. And if there are contaminants within recycling, we're going to leave education material. And if the property owner has failed or there's things in there that shouldn't be, we're going to continue to do the audit of that same property until such time that we can gain compliance. And again, I know this is more of an educational thing because people are trying to do the right thing. You could easily put it in the other bin, but they're doing it the other way to make this region a cleaner place. So this is, again, an educational campaign, but if there are continued failed audits, we will proceed with a bylaw officer potentially visiting them, sending a registered letter to encourage compliance. Again, we want to do a soft approach here to educate people. Some of the other strategies in the plan include enhancing the town's website, providing more information with regards to recycling. I know there's a lot of information out there, and I know sometimes it is confusing, but it's something that we have to do. We're going to be providing stickers to put in the inside of the recycling bins just to show people here's the things that you can or can't do. And potentially even hosting information tables at Saturday markets, that type of thing. So we're going to be making a much bigger presence in the community on recycling. So unfortunately, if we do not improve on our audits that with Recycle BC, they will levy fines. And so although it's an important thing just from the environment perspective, there is a financial piece to it if we don't succeed in this endeavor. And I know, again, I feel people that are recycling are trying to do the right thing. So education is important. And we strongly encourage residents to maybe open up that recycling pamphlet and take a look at things that you should and should not throw away. Because the sooner that we can pass these quarterly audits, the sooner we can get off this program, saving the community money and hopefully not incurring future fines. So we're really asking for the cooperation of the community. I think we're all in this together. We're all trying to do the right thing. And that's where we're at.
Thank you very much. I do know that in Area A, starting on July the 1st, there is a new program coming in. And that is that the trucks or the bins will be provided to Area A residents next year, and perhaps sooner than that if we get that organized. The town will have the same type of program where bins are provided and the trucks will pick them up. Now, having dealt with this at the regional district, I do know that the trucks can now, because each bin has a number on it, they can, as they empty them, I believe, figure out whether that particular bin has some contaminants in it. So this program that absolutely we need to deal with now may be taken over by the contractor next year as they figure that out. Definitely by July 1st, 2026, the town will have this in place. But in Area A outside of town, it starts on with a different program. It'll end up being the same in 2025 and July 1st. So I happen to live in Area A just outside of town, so I know that I have to get myself organized and we'll have bins delivered to my house fairly soon. Did you have a question, Councillor Chong?
Yes, thank you. So Just how is the percentage contaminant rate calculated? So is it? I assume it's not by weight.
So it's a few things. What they actually do is they grab a few bins, and those bins get shipped out to the coast, and it goes through a process to do their audit. So they do kind of a stirring of the materials, and then they sift through to see, or they take a percentage of that and go through it. So it's basically a kind of a weight volume type thing. And it's a really interesting process, strange in a way. And so, it could be we could have been just unlucky, hit a few bins that had a bunch of contaminants in them. And again, they just take a sample of a sample and analyze that piece. And it's supposed to, volume and a weight thing. So maybe I'll just elaborate a little bit more. We know we've been hovering on that line for a few years, and again, we just went over. So we do know that there's an issue, within the community. It wasn't just a one-time hit that we exceeded. We've always been just on that line of potentially being exceeding, and we did hit that exceeding. So I know I provided a little more information than you asked for, but I just wanted to elaborate a bit.
Just as a follow-up then, with the highest percentage of contaminants being made up of, hard soft cover books, ceramic, scrap metal, and textiles, in this group, what percentage do they make up, like the total gross? Like if we were to just reel in these 4 categories, would that be enough to bring us into compliance?
If everything stayed equal, we should stay in compliance. But one of the struggles is they just take a few bins and take a sample from those few bins. So in those samples that they've been doing our audits on, if everything stayed the same and is the same throughout the entire community, yes, we would be successful. But again, the problem is they're only doing an audit on 0.1% of all our recycling material. So it's almost a hit and miss, So again, if all the other bins have exactly the same makeup, or the community as a whole, as to what our audit says, the answer to your question is yes.
And how big is their sample size then?
It's fairly small. It's only a few bins. It's not significant. It's not like 25% of our take. They take just a few bins, and that's how they base their audit. Yeah, it's very, very
inaccurate.
Well,
Is probably the best one. I just feel the standard deviation on that data set would be
huge.
insane.
It's huge. So it's definitely something we asked about, but this is their provincial standard and how they do things. So you can absolutely, the sample, it could potentially definitely not be reflective of what's in your community. The only piece is that we do know, from several audits previously, we were always hovering around there. So we do likely know, that reduces the chance of the result of skewing the results based on several, is we're always just hovering on that piece, and they maybe this time picked the wrong bin.
I'd like to also add that anything that goes into the recycling needs to be clean. And I have seen several things. People throw peanut butter containers into the recycling, but they don't wash them out first. So when they do recycling and garbage week up at the landfill, and I've been up there several times when they've done it, and operators up there need to go through the recycling bins on a daily basis before the landfill opens, or this is the way it used to be, it probably still is. And they would have to go through and make sure that everything in there was correct. And if not, then they had to load it into a truck and take it up and empty it into the garbage. So things that are unclean, unwashed. And as an example, if you're using a newspaper for something and you bake cookies on it and it's got grease stains, that can't go in the recycling. That has to go in to the garbage. So there's a lot of education on this, and these 4 I know have been identified, but there's a lot more that people don't realize. And I'm hoping that that this will make sure that people do realize that those are important. Anybody else? Councillor King?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Followed Councillor Chong's comment. I guess we have no say on which bins they choose, so they kind of dictate the good or the bad or the ugly. My other question though is relating to, this is focused on residential. Do commercial have the same restraints? Because those four materials sound like items in a bigger bin than a household bin. So,
Yes, so right now the audit is on our residential bins, the ones that we pick up in front of yards. The contracts with the apartment complexes are separate. So I guess if they did something there, they would, I don't know how they audit those entities. I do want to clarify just a couple things. I think I indicated to Councillor Chong that it's also by volume, that the main within the audit is really the weight. And so you can get skewed as well. Like, you get a couple pieces of metal or something like that really skew the results. I mean, one of the positive things, I guess, in this whole thing is that when we start getting, unfortunately, staff going through the recycling bins, we can potentially get a little bit more detail as to what is contaminating our sources, because that's going to be, like, in our staff going through it, is it, the full peanut butter jar, that type of thing, and slowly pick away at some of these other pieces. So we'll gather more information and be able to target and change messaging based on potentially some of the findings that we find.
Thank you. I would also suggest that when we present messaging, we try to cast with as wide a net as possible. Because after, was it last meeting, I went on the website to try to figure out what is yes and no. And it's basically it's paralysis by analysis. Like, there's so many options. So really it's like, I feel it should be almost like algorithmic based, where is there food on it? Garbage. Is there no food? Potentially recycling. Is it paper? Is it is it a book? No. Like, make it simple that way and try to just cast and try to get like the biggest offenders, as opposed to being like plastic number 7. No. Plastic number 6 is okay though. But I don't know if they actually are. That's just an example. But like, it just gets really, really confusing that way. So if we can just try to keep it as simple as possible, and with the goal of, perfection is always the enemy of good, and good is often good enough. So just try to keep it as simple as possible.
I agree, Councillor Chong. It is you need a degree in some of this stuff, or maybe some of the kids in school. I think they're also more educated on recycling than maybe the parents, and couldn't agree more. Trying to get the big hits, and again, hopefully these internal audits will reveal some things, and we'll focus definitely on the bigger, more easily identifiable things to get our numbers in line. So I couldn't agree with you more.
So will the audits come back as a report to council in 6 months or something like that, or do we know that yet?
So my understanding is our staff are going to be doing it weekly. So as we have resources available, we'll be going out and doing these random checks and following up on those that kind of fail that initial audit, continue to on that piece. So we're going to do that through education, and Recycle BC, I believe, is going to do their audits quarterly. So we'll definitely keep council aware and the public aware of how we're making out, because we're all in this together and we want to succeed. And so we can definitely bring back some of the results to the CAO report as far as how we're monitoring it, because I think the last thing we need at this point is fines or other costs that are added on to our citizens. So I think we're going to really take the lead from Recycle BC. They've done these in several communities, and try to steal from the successes of others, and hopefully come into compliance soon, and again accomplish 2 things: reducing staff time doing a lot of this work behind the scenes, and also improving our environment and doing the right thing. So we can provide updates through the CAO report, and I think you'll also see it in the media and our website, as far as here's how we're doing, so we can get the community behind this effort.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So you would like a recommendation? And there are two options. Um, Can can we recommend that council approve the strategy for reduction of contamination in curbside recycling? Or that we wish further information prior to dealing with this matter? Council?
I recommend option one.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Poderica, all in favor. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. I'm wondering, Mr. Risling, the next is the airport master plan, and I'm wondering if you would rather do the short-term rental first.
Yes, your worship, we're juggling a lot of schedules and travel plans. So if council can adjust the agenda at this point to do short-term rentals next and rather than the airport, that would be muchly appreciated. The representative is not here for the airport.
That's fine. So would that be Mr. Garish that is going to do this, or Ms. Duong?
I think
Mr. Garish?
Mr.
are you-
Garish, I see.
And
Okay, go ahead.
Mayor,
yes,
sorry to interrupt. We would like a motion just to change the order.
absolutely.
So if we could have a motion that council change the order of the staff reports by moving 3, short-term rental regulation review, to number 2 and renumber accordingly.
Thank you. A seconder. Thank you, Councillor Chong. All in favor. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And the other thing is, I'm wondering if this podium could be moved. Do we need it anymore? I think it's in the way for some people. So, Mr. Garish, welcome. We understand you've had a busy time this weekend, so were your parents down there in California? Is that why? Oh, I thought they might be. Okay, can we then move on to short-term rentals regulation review, what we heard? And that's what you're going to report on, are you?
Well, I'm going to present just a really quick overview slash introduction, and then we have our consultant team from Urban Systems who's going to do a presentation. And just for council's benefit, as you recall, I believe it was late last year that we had some proposed bylaw amendments for your consideration at committee, and council gave direction to initiate those. And so part of the initiation process was public engagement to get feedback from the community on what they thought of the proposed amendments. And that's where Urban Systems came in and was able to help us with that particular component of this project. And so we have Mr. Penner from Urban, and I believe he's got a PowerPoint presentation that will go over, well, as the report is entitled, what we heard through this consultation process.
Thank you. So we're moving it right over to, is it Mr. Penner? Thank you. Mr. Penner, if you're online there, would you please go ahead with the report on what we heard report from the short-term rentals. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Is everyone able to hear me well? Am I coming through on your end? Hello?
Could you speak again and see if it's improved? Mr. Penner? Keep talking because the girls are adjusting the volume. Okay. Does that work? Okay, we're not able to hear you. You're cutting out. Is there? Yeah. Hmm. So we can see the screen now. If we could just hear you, and that will work better.
There we go. Is everyone able to hear me better now?
Thank you very much. That's great. Go
Okay,
ahead, please.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate everyone's time this morning. So I'm going to go through a presentation that more or less is a summary of the What We Heard report, which is more or less an engagement summary report for the short-term rental pilot program engagement that was completed in March of this year. So hopefully everyone's able to see the presentation up on the screen. So yeah, the purpose of this presentation is just to provide an overview of the pilot program engagement, the objectives of that engagement, the different communication and engagement activities that were completed as part of the pilot program engagement, and then spending some time going through the key themes and feedback that we heard from the community and stakeholders. So that includes, just the broader public within Osoyoos. That includes individual unit owners from different complexes that may have some implications with the proposed bylaws as well as with the short-term legislation that's been implemented by the province. So we'll go through that and then just provide opportunities for questions and comments from council at the end of the presentation. So we'll hold some time aside for Q&A at the end here. So as Chris mentioned earlier, really the purpose of the engagement overview was to implement a council resolution to conduct community engagement on the proposed short-term rental pilot program, with a focus on engagement and on reviewing the related bylaw amendments that are being proposed that would create the regulatory framework for the legal operation of short-term rentals in the community, as well as clarifying with the community and with key stakeholders, for example, unit owners and certain building operators, what the provincial short-term rental requirements are in terms of, being a licensed operator and in accordance with the province's principal resident requirements. So as part of this, there are many unique buildings in Osoyoos, resort-style condominiums, strata hotels, where there's not so much a gray area, but just, there's very clear exemptions and very clear areas where, short-term rental regulations would apply and where provincial requirements would apply. So we use this engagement as an opportunity to try to clarify how certain buildings were being used, and then helping unit owners or managers of those buildings identify what would be the requirements that they would need to obtain, if any, in order to continue operating as a short-term rental, mostly with being able to continue to market and advertise units on third-party websites such as Airbnb and Vrbo. So our objectives with this engagement were really to inform and educate the general public and key stakeholders on, what the pilot program is, what the provincial legislation is, what the provincial requirements are, and how it all ties together, to raise awareness within the community on opportunities to engage with us, and then to understand their perspectives. So I'm trying to understand how the community feels and thinks about the proposed program, the intent of the program, the proposed bylaw amendments that are included, and then ensuring that their community, the input from the community, was recorded and clearly, summarized in a document to improve transparency and promote trust in the process. So prior to the engagement, we did put out quite a few communications and notices and just information out on the pilot program and related engagement activities that were conducted. So this included some project-specific web page on the town's website that had information, e-news updates. There was a newspaper article. We used an RSVP platform called Eventbrite for some of the meetings for people to register to. And there was a bunch of information on those on the Eventbrite website, as well as a short-term rental brochure that we provided. In terms of the actual engagement activities, we completed a community survey, so an online and hard copy survey that was really about understanding broader sentiments in the community about short-term rentals, but also with the proposed pilot program. We had 2 public information meetings, one of which was in person in the community, another of which was completed online. We also held a virtual stakeholder meeting that was targeted towards individual owners and operators and managers of some of those unique strata hotels and other resort style condominium buildings that exist in the community. We also had a feedback forum for folks that attended the open house, both virtual and online, and a brief stakeholder survey for individuals that attended the virtual stakeholder meeting. So in total, we had over 400 participants be involved in the engagement activities. Obviously, some individuals participated in multiple activities, but we did have a fairly high degree of participation. And all of the results of those activities have been summarized in the What We Heard report, which was included in the agenda package here. So the community survey, we ran that from March 6th to April 4th. The questions included several topics, including the individual respondents' connection to tourism and short-term rentals, like, are they an owner operator? Are they just an interested citizen or community member? Are they, actively involved in the tourism industry? And we were just trying to understand like different perspectives based on people's connection to the entire topic. Then there were a few questions that were more broadly on community perspectives on short-term rentals. Like, is this something that you generally support in the community or don't support? Explaining the pilot program draft bylaws and engaging general support on those. So through that survey, we had over 300 responses. A lot of very, very detailed surveys were completed that we have the results attached to the What We Heard report. So again, we got quite a bit of feedback through the survey that we've summarized into the What We Heard report. The two public informations we held on consecutive days, so on March 11th and the virtual one on March 12th. The in-person included information poster boards, and those were facilitated by project team members. So folks on hand like myself to answer questions, walk people through the information, and just explain, again, dating back all the way to work that has been done historically on this topic in SOUs to the proposed bylaw amendments, and looking at also some information about, how does this proposed program compare or stock up with other communities in the region in terms of like their requirements, from a business licensing perspective, from a zoning perspective. It was fairly well attended. I think we had close to 60 or 70 people show up. Big rush at the beginning, and it really turned into a big Q&A. So I was able to answer quite a few really good questions from attendees. Then we had a virtual meeting as well, and we had about 25 participants partake in the virtual meeting, and really we just took the information boards and put them into a presentation format, and then had a Q&A at the end for individuals that wanted to answer questions or have questions answered. The other activity we did was a virtual stakeholder meeting. So this was targeted towards unit owners and managers, and we did a direct invite out to all of the individual owners and managers from certain buildings in the community. So again, strata hotels, some of the resort condominium complexes that exist. We did a bit of a presentation and a longer Q&A that included topics on clarifying provincial short-term rental requirements and, how would those be applicable in a SOUs, right? Like there were quite a few owners or individuals representing a specific building that are technically exempt from principal residence requirements. There are some like opt-outs or some exemptions in provincial legislation. So again, we had to clarify for some of them, like, you probably don't have to do this, right? Like there's a different path for you versus, someone operating an Airbnb out of their home. So again, a lot of the discussion was on the applicability of provincial and town, the proposed town short-term rental requirements for the resort, commercial, and other strata title tourist accommodations in town. And we had about 35, probably closer to 40 participants, again, people coming on and off the call at various points as part of that. So with all of that feedback, we tried our best to distill it down into a short summary document, just highlighting the key points. There were 6 key themes that emerged through the engagement activities. So one is generally a higher level of support for short-term rentals broadly in the community. So hearing a lot from participants that short-term rentals are an important part of the local economy, being a vacation, sun destination in the summer. Short-term rentals are really important for helping draw in visitors, and in turn, those visitors are supporting local business. Also a lot of support for people who, wanted to operate it as an income supplement, having the opportunity to do so. But with that, there was also a very high level of support generally for the idea of the short-term rental pilot program. So this is really tying back to support for short-term rentals, but recognizing that there needs to be some structure or some regulation in place to ensure that they are operated in a manner that isn't going to cause impacts, on adjacent properties or broadly in the community. And then it's done in a safe manner as well. Another key theme that came up was, and this is tied to the general support for short-term rentals, but just recognition of the importance or impact of short-term rentals in tourism and the local economy. There were also some comments that noted, short-term rentals and their impact on available housing supply can be a detriment to the local economy because it can make it difficult for, workers or, people who want to relocate to the community to, live there, full time. It can potentially reduce those opportunities or make it more challenging. Another big topic that came up was on enforcement and administration. So more broadly, if we're going to implement this proposed program, what is the cost or the effort required on the town side to enforce and administer this program? So we heard a lot of questions about that. There was also a lot of discussion on the principal resident requirement. And I'll go through these in a bit more detail in the following slides, but there was a bit more of a different opinion or mixed opinion on principal resident requirements. And another key theme was just understanding the short-term rental pilot program in the provincial legislation. There's just a lot of information. The province, has created this sort of environment for short-term rentals in the province, but there is a lot of information that hasn't found its way to those that are implicated or affected. So there were a lot of questions, a lot of misunderstandings about what the provincial legislation is, what the pilot program is. There was I'd say pretty big lack of awareness that currently short-term rentals are an illegal use and a SO use, they're a non-permitted use. So even people recognizing that, I think was news to them. So going through them just quickly in a bit more detail, and for each one of these themes, there's a page in the What We Heard report that provides some key themes and takeaways and some of the key survey results that came through. But yeah, starting with general support. So again, there was an overwhelming majority of support from participants for the allowance of short-term rentals and SO use. And a smaller majority of support from participants regarding the pilot project and related amendment bylaws. So again, people saying we should allow this, it should be regulated, but a bit more of a mixed opinion on the pilot program bylaw amendments themselves. I think the main comment there was there was a good level of support, but for those that were maybe opposed to it, it wasn't the idea of regulations. It was maybe just the extent or some of the specific requirements that have been included in those draft bylaw amendments. Again, going back to tourism and economic impacts, again, many participants noted the impact of short-term rentals and in the SO use economy from a positive, but also from a negative perspective. And again, there was a pretty even, split in the dialogue there. Again, a lot of people, saying this is a good thing. A lot of people saying, there could be some impacts here that we need to really think about, like housing availability. And I think, in general, the sentiment or kind of the perspectives on the pro versus opposed side, that split is pretty reflective of past engagement activities that have been done on this topic. So we haven't seen a huge shift in the community's general level of support for this. As I mentioned, enforcement and administration is a really big thing or a question topic that came through the engagement process. So many people were really just curious about what is this going to cost the town to implement and administer and enforce? What is their actual ability to enforce? How can we recover costs so it's not being, a subsidy from existing ratepayers or existing taxpayers in the community. Principal resident requirement. There was again mixed support. So some participants noted that this is a good thing, that we should have this because it will give us better ability to enforce and regulate short-term rentals. There were others that were unsupportive and noted it as a barrier for short-term rental operation. Mostly folks that are operating these units from a distance and don't live in the property are the ones that are, largely voicing a lack of support for the principal resident requirement. Especially, for example, individuals that are, owning certain units and living away from them for, significant periods of time or not living them at all. And then the final one, just awareness and understanding of the pilot program. There was a lot of confusion from some participants on the proposed pilot program, principal residency requirements, the draft amendment bylaws, the provincial legislation. And that makes sense. And this is, something that, every community is kind of grappling with. There's a lot of information here, a lot of new regulation coming in by the province, but also by local governments across BC. And to counter this, there was just a demand or, a request that can we have more simple guides or resources in the future that can help explain this to us, for prospective operators if this program is implemented. So just some broader key takeaways from the engagements. I would say there was a high degree of community interest, participation, and engagement in the short-term rental pilot program engagement. The results and feedback themes largely reflect past efforts and discussions in the community. Like there hasn't been a big movement on the dial in terms of how the community generally feels about short-term rentals and SOUs. There was a broader level of support, but also recognition of the need to have some degree of regulation. And again, that regulation, the level of it kind of varied between different segments of participants. So again, obviously those currently operating or hoping to operate a short-term rental or, advocating for a looser degree of regulation, residents that have maybe experienced some impacts, from short-term rentals, like living beside one, or just general community members were, voicing a stronger degree of regulation. A ton of the discussion was on implementation, enforcement, and cost recovery by the town. So if you note in the draft amendment bylaws that have been prepared, one of which is the business license bylaw, which is proposing a fee increase for applications for short-term rental. And again, the thinking is to try to use that money to recoup some of the costs that would be incurred on the town for administering the program. And then again, just a lot of clarifying questions from individuals seeking to better understand provincial regulations. And just being made aware of certain buildings that are exempted from this entire sort of regulatory framework or system that's been put in place, right? There are a lot of exempted buildings, throughout the province, including some in SOU. So we just discussed, again, their path and process for becoming compliant, which is different than, a standard, short-term rental operator using their home as an Airbnb. So there's a lot of information. The themes and results in the What We Heard report, again, are based on feedback and input heard from the community. They're not our professional opinions or recommendations. They're just our best attempt at summarizing the immense amount of feedback that we got through this program or through this engagement program, and really hope that it provides value on councils and helping you make a determination on the path forward here in the community, knowing that it's going to be a busy summer and things are on the horizon. So on that note, I'm happy to take any questions or comments from council on the What We Heard report or on this presentation. As needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Penner. We appreciate the detailed report that you have provided. And it was interesting to read the comments from people on what they were concerned about and some of the questions and some of the issues that they felt were most important. So I will turn it over to council and see if anybody has any questions or comments? Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Mr. Penner, I guess my big thing is when I look at this and I read through all the stuff, one of the things we talk about is long-term affordable housing, and that if by having less Airbnbs, that would make it more available. And when I take a look at a lot of the houses that come up for sale since this has happened, they're saying the $1 million range. Even if those people sold those houses and they went down to 900,000, I still don't see that bringing affordable housing into Suyas. That brings more houses on the market. I don't see the rents going down. They might go down from say 3,000 to 2,800 on those homes, because most of those larger rental homes are bigger homes. My second, I guess, statement would be that the big thing is an enforcement, because right now, if we have somebody with a bed and breakfast, and we have a few in town that have just totally have 8 cars there and they just party and they've been told, and the town spent years trying to get them to stop and even getting people, having to hire people in Vancouver to deliver their complaints and stuff. It's somehow we got to be able to make that enforceable. And I don't know if court server, I mean, that's just all costs money. So I guess that, I don't know if there has to be somebody local on site, if that be a property manager or somebody, that if the enforcement officer here has a complaint, they can go to that house with that person who's in charge of that. So when you're talking about like some of our high-end condo owners and stuff, there's a manager on site. So if there's a problem, they can go to that manager. It's not just somebody going to the house and the kids go, well, we don't really care because the owner's in Vancouver. So that's just a couple of my comments. And I think really is enforcement is huge, huge, huge in this whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions, concerns? It's going to take us a while to deal with this. Definitely, we know that their enforcement is a big one, and that's partly why we have the $750 annual fee that is proposed in the pilot, and definitely that would help to pay for the enforcement, which is why I believe it was put in there to begin with. Councillor Chung, you had a question?
Thank you. This might be a little outside of the scope of this presentation because we're starting to go down the route of fining. But I'm going to, this question kind of directed to Mr. Garish here. My understanding, and I don't remember the specific numbers, but with the provincial regulation program of STRs, the fining amounts changed quite significantly. So if I recall correctly, it went up to $1,400 per day for fining, and then I think it's a maximum of 50,000 for fining. And in addition, we have a streamlined direct line to the Supreme Court for additional legal enforcement. Of course, re-clarify those numbers. But my question really is, with those fines, would a portion of those fines be given back to the municipality to cover the enforcement, the staffing required or resources required for enforcement, or have those details not been released by the province yet?
So through the mayor, I'll just start with some clarification. So the province did amend the legislation, and in relation to the Offence Act, if a court finds somebody guilty, I think the maximum has gone from 10,000 to 50,000. They also changed the legislation that relates to the town's municipal ticketing information bylaw. And I believe the maximum fine for infraction of that bylaw has gone from $1,000 to $3,000, and some of the amendments that we proposed last December put to council increasing the fines in that bylaw. They did not touch the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw regulations, although I know council just adopted that bylaw itself back in March. So that's another opportunity for fining. And in relation to any fines that the province may be collecting, I'm not aware of what the totals or the sums of those are, and I suspect I'm not aware of any offer by the province to share any of those funds collected with local governments. I think it'll be up to this council through its own fine bylaws to start collecting against infractions.
So basically to summarize, our finding capability in terms of the amount has increased significantly, which can then go towards cost recovery and increase enforcement potentially.
Go ahead, Councillor Poderica.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's something else to emphasize on this is the fact that this is an activity which, with the exception of poor properties, has always been prohibited in the town of Vesuvius. And it's something that probably should have been addressed a long time ago and has been passed down from council to council to council. And now with support from some provincial legislation allows us to do so. One of the big changes to that obviously is rather than a line that says you cannot accommodate a property for less than 30 days, there is teeth to a bylaw, and there's a bylaw that actually would emphasize and support the enforcement side of things, which in the past hasn't been the case. So that is a big step for us moving forward. The provincial support also in terms of their enforcement is an added bonus for us to crack down on those that do abuse the system and take advantage of the situation. And, you know, us being able to control with some parameters as to how STRs operate and function in the town of Vesuvius. We know they're important. We know they provide great impact to the economy. We also know that 200 to 300 to 400 of them have been operating, I won't say under the radar because we all know they're there, but they've been operating against the bylaw for all this time. So I think it's important that, you know, we do have a bylaw in place. If we proceed, that would allow us to proceed and enforce this. So,
Thank you. Councillor Chong?
Kind of echoing or continuing with Councillor Poderica's comments too, is we have to kind of remember the scope and then the purpose of this project. I agree with Councillor Bennett with some of the $1 million plus homes, like those aren't going to add to the housing market. But we also, reading through all the comments, there seems to be a lot of owners who bought investment properties, which are condos, for the pure purpose of short-term rentals and also as a summer home. These are the properties that will be targeted, not targeted, but these are more accessible for those who are, you know, my age and younger, who are looking for their first home. So it's important to remember, like, these properties will actually add significantly to the housing market. If not, then another source of long-term rentals, because it's a balance. On one hand, yes, we are a very tourism-driven town. On the other hand, as a business owner, we find one of the biggest issues with recruitment is housing. And we see that with the town. We've had multiple previous staff and even prospective staff who housing is high up on the lists of barriers. So by opening up this housing supply, we're able to assist businesses, local businesses, in attracting more staff and attracting more talent. At the same time, we also empower our current residents who live here. It's our primary residence. We've increased densification, which allow for potentially an ensuite to be built or a carriage home to be built, depending on the zoning. But guess what? Now there's an opportunity for our local residents to also participate in tourism and also make some profit from our lifeblood here, and that money stays in this economy. It doesn't go to someone who owns 3 or 4 condos who lives elsewhere. So there's a lot of economic positives. And also to address one of the common themes I was reading through the comments was that the business licensing fee is too high. And we discussed this when we were trying to determine the 750 number. We cross-referenced between other municipalities, and we did go a little higher. And the reason is so that we don't have to revisit it in like 5 years and redetermine what the next fee is. And frankly speaking, if I recall correctly, I think the average night stay for a short-term rental is about $200 to $300 for a single family. I mean, that's 3 nights, right? So to echo some of the comments saying it's cost prohibitive, the math doesn't really support that argument, frankly. But thank you for all the work. This had taken some hours and has been really enlightening to give us data so that we can make the best decision possible. So thank you.
Right, I just wanted to add one comment about the 750 annual fee. I was talking to a friend of mine in Penticton and I said, what are you doing in Penticton? What are we doing? Because everybody's looking at it differently. And she said, don't worry about that fee. Oftentimes people can make that in one weekend. And so, you know what, if you're doing this quite often, you're going to make a profit from the sounds of it for sure. Okay, so it looks like at this time, I'll just read what it says here. Administration is providing this what we heard report for information only. The implementing amendment bylaws associated with the short-term rental pilot program, as well as any recommendations for potential changes to the bylaws, will be provided to council at a forthcoming meeting for consideration. So is there anything else that we need to put on the agenda at this point on this issue? No, we're good? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Garish, and thank you, Mr. Penner.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, can I just check? We are going back to the airport. Odes. Oh, okay. So I see Mr. Underwood is here as well, so he did a lot of the report. So who's reporting on this? Is it Mr. Underwood or Mr. Risling?
Mr. Underwood.
Or both?
And his team were the author of the thesis that is included in your agenda today. And so he's going to be covering an overview of that document. As council is aware and public's aware, that airport is a valuable asset, and there's been a group of volunteers that have dedicated a lot of hours to improve that facility greatly. Again, council's aware and reiterating it to the public. You know, they've qualified for several grants. They've done things like fencing, expanding the runway, adding tie down. So they're from a positive perspective, we have a very active, engaged group of airport enthusiasts. And one of the things that council has brought up in the past is with regards to the airport and what type of development opportunities are there, what are and also being cognizant of taxpayer dollars. And so again, one of the things the council was interested in, as well as the Old Society, is, you know, is there a financial mechanism that would potentially stimulate growth and not place an additional burden on taxpayers? And therefore, they embarked upon a project to which True is led, and again included in the agenda, which includes an asset management plan as well as a financial analysis for council's viewing as well as the public's viewing. And like that basically covers it. And I'm going to ask Mr. Underwood to maybe go through in his 600 and some page thesis here. And hopefully he's going to condense it.
Can I just say that that when I had my binder for this weekend, I took out the Oates report and put it in a separate binder. So I have it ready in front of me. This is very comprehensive, and I'm glad that we have members of Oates here and also Mr. Underwood. So please go ahead, please.
I've done my best to take the 600 pages and get it down to about 12 slides. So that should help you. Yeah, and I guess we were retained by Oates to do this report, and part of, I guess, the completion of it is to present it to council, and you know, it'll help inform kind of future discussions with Oates and you know, the future of the airport. So I got four kind of major topics to go through. The first is just simply the existing airport and what we have. And then in our work, we had to develop a master plan for where the airport's going to go in the life of this study. This study is lensed on a 10-year, but it could easily be 20. Like, it's just the pace and implementation isn't set yet. We then had to review the site servicing aspects to implement the master plan. So we had accurate costs, which we then fed to a separate financial consultant that we retain often on these development projects to help fact check all of our revenue assumptions, our cost assumptions, and present a backup report that tells us, usually on developments, whether or not we're going to make money. The primary goal here was to not lose money or not to add additional burden to the taxpayer as a result of this, right? That is key here, is that whatever we do should stand alone. And this report does show that that happens. So this is the existing airport as it sits today. You can see that there's an 850-meter long runway. There's about 9 gravel tie-down sites that exist now. That's some recent upgrades that Odes has done. They've been graded out level. You can see the little airplane symbols sitting there. That's where the tie-downs actually exist. There's a paved apron and a short paved taxiway. That's kind of the limits of what we have out there right now. The master plan's kind of developed in several phases to try and break the costs down in incremental pieces so that it can be implemented over time and in smaller bites. The first phase that you see here is the construction of one hangar building that has 3 hangars. I don't think the laser works. Yeah, you can see the 3 hangars on the left with a proposed asphalt taxiway to the hangars. The servicing for those hangars exists right in the road, just below those hangars. So these are very economical to service. That area that's left in the airport, I guess I can go back one slide to show, like, the area that we have to develop is simply around where our tie downs are. The town has already sold the larger developable pieces towards where Home Hardware is, and those are all to the left there. There's not much room left within the offset from the runway to be, from a safety height perspective, to be able to develop. So you can see this hangar structure, the first one close to the airport. That's basically as close to the airport as we can build a hangar and still meet our clearances from a vertical clearance for takeoff and landing from the center line of the runway. And so this initial phase does get some minor amenities to the airport, which is a washroom. It has power, some parking, a formalized gate. Like right now, it's very informal how you even get onto there. There's just this gravel kind of strip and some gates that may or may not be locked.
Could I ask where you see the washroom going?
Yeah, if I could use my laser. Yeah, just as an addition off of the hangar, then that would be an amenity that would be operated and maintained by Odes. Yep.
Just a quick point of clarification. This washroom will be 4 seasons, right?
Yeah, that we assumed, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was.
The other thing we've done is in this figure, you can see we've rotated all the tie downs 90 degrees. So we've actually increased the number of tie downs to 20 by this optimization of the geometry. The planes that are generally going to be tied down are shorter, so they can be within a different height clearance. So they are slightly closer to the center of the airplane or the runway. And so we've increased the number of tie downs to 20, which Odes can, or any revenue can be generated from the tie downs just as much as revenue can be generated from the lease of those hangars. The total cost of this phase is about $2 million, and that includes the cost of building the hangars. The second phase in the master plan is to bring fuel to the airport. And so you can see that's just off to the right past the tie downs now. We've added an extension to the taxiway to a fuel station. Fuel is seen as an important thing to be able to attract tenants that want to be able to use there. They have to be able to fuel up their aircraft. Fuel does come with a decent operation and maintenance cost though, because the filters and everything have to be changed annually. It has to be inspected. It has to be a proper fuel dispensing system. So it does come with about a 10,000 a year operations cost just to have the fuel. So you need to generate enough customer demand to be able to try and pay for that, and that can be challenging. But the actual cost of this extension is about a $500,000 phase. So it's a smaller project compared to building hangars. Phase 3 is another hangar building. You can see we've had to erase some of the tie downs now where there's hangars going on top of them. Basically, the area where the current tie downs are is the only place we can build hangars because it's the only place far enough away from the airstrip. So we've replaced the lost tie downs with new tie downs to the right here in this figure of the avgas. A key line here, and I'll have to point to the screen, sorry, is right here, this road, there's a road. That's the edge of the highway right away as it is. So we can't build hangars in the highway right away, but we're leveling off the gravel area. And it is within our fenced area. So we're going to be having tie downs there. So it's not a permanent structure, but the hangars are permanent. So we're making sure they're all within the airport land. So we did talk to Highways about potentially closing some of that road, and we were unsuccessful at acquiring more land to be added to the airport by closing that road. But they obviously were okay with where our current fences are. When we do this hangar, we now have to bring servicing into this area. So corresponding to this, you can see the red and the blue is sewer and water, and purple is power. So we're pre-laying power, and so there is a significant servicing cost with phase 3 that to build just 2 hangars, it's another $1 million project. Half of that is in servicing, half of that is the cost of the hangars. You'll see now in future phases, we're now moving across the tie down. So phase 4 is another 3 hangar building with servicing. We've added some more parking. You can see to the south of the hangars in the road right away. And I won't go through the cost of each one, but you can see I'll just go to phase 5, more hangars moving over. And ultimately it's the market that'll decide like how many hangars are in each phase, because you could start combining phases. It's simply just now building hangars across. If the market said a 4-bay hangar was correct, it could easily be a 4-bay. If it said another 2 is correct, then that's it. So it becomes very up to the judgment on implementation as you go across now as to how many hangars we can get. And then in the end, you can see out past the lease or the sold land, the developed industrial land, there's more hangars or tie downs being added to the north end where we can't build anything, but we do have room off the end of the current taxiway to add more tie downs to replace what we've been taking out along the way. So this is an image of phase 7, which is the full build out, which is many tie downs. We've added 4 asphalt tie downs beside the avgas you can see in this phase, and gravel tie downs and hangars. So this is the limit, is what we can say is what the master plan is for the land we have available at the airport. And so this is the maximum revenue generating model we figure we can come up with for rentable tie downs and leasable.
Does the tie down have to be a certain difference from the fueling station?
That's a good question. Yeah, they do. Yeah. The answer is yes, but I don't actually know off the top of my head what the answer to that question is, like how far it is. Yeah. No, that we did look at these separations, so yeah. The way the plane symbol might be drawn backwards, it might have to turn around to look further, but yeah. So once we, came up with this, we looked at the total utility upgrades that would be required for all, and we did break them into phases. We also looked at the impact from these demands that would be created here on the town's greater sewer and water systems to make sure we had the capacity to allow this to happen without incurring off-site upgrade costs. Fortunately, most of the water and sewer in this area was designed to an industrial level because of the development down Empire. So it turned out that this could incrementally be added to the water and sewer system and not place a burden on it. So off-site upgrades weren't required. It's simply extensions of services from the existing mains that the town has that flank this property. Another assignment that Odes asked us to look at was building guidelines, like design guidelines for these structures. And we did actually need to do some work on that, deciding what these structures were when we decided if we had enough water for, say, fire protection. And what we learned was that if we assumed that they had to meet basic building code compliance for fire ratings, that took care of a lot of Odes's concerns with appearance out here. They didn't want those white coverall buildings being the hangars. We also learned that those didn't work for our fire separations from these buildings. So basically, by our recommendation in the report is that they have to meet basic BC Building Code fire standards. That eliminates many of these buildings. Pre-engineered steel buildings is what you see a lot of these hangar buildings made out of. That was generally satisfactory to what Odes visioned for, what a building should or could look like. Obviously, other framing techniques like wood would be acceptable, but they would have to be cladded in materials that are fire rated. Then we get into the financial analysis. So the total cost to build all the phases is $10 million. It's a significant investment. And we didn't want to put additional burden on the town. So what was assumed is that the town supported the beginning of each new phase with kind of a $10,000 contribution. It also assumes that the town continued to invest what the town is already investing. So a key thing in there would maybe be insurance, and some sort of maintenance costs that you're doing. The way the financial model works is it assumes that the town's paying that money to Odes, and then Odes is doing the maintenance now, but the town is still investing what they were. The other assumption that's made in there for what the town's participating is the town's contributing tax revenue that's generated from these leases. And so that is something that I challenged our financial guy on, because I'm like, that's really hard to measure. Like, we don't usually take tax revenue from one area and say, this is what it is. But like his counter to that is that it is additional revenue that the town's seeing. Yes, it won't be in a budget line item, but we are able to say that revenue, is a revenue here. And so then it's adding to the contribution of what's given to Odes for the management. So this is something that we need to go over. But Odes, in the end, is responsible for 100% of these costs. It assumes that the owners will, the people that are leasing the hangars will be paying for the hangar development costs, but then Odes is going to have to seek external funding like they've been doing all along for additional projects. We estimated around 2.5 to 3 million is what Odes is going to have to find in future grants to continue to make this work. The financial analysis shows the project at the end of the 10-year making money. Is that it net over a 10-year model, the town's or the town's income is 10,000. So that's not 10,000 per year, that's 10,000 net. So I would say it's definitely that balance of just breaking even, where if you're 10,000 to positive, you could have easily been 10,000 to the negative when you look at the assumptions that are made. I do have, the next slide shows it all, and I don't want everyone to be able to read it, but I want to point out this slide, and it's in your appendix C, table 3 on your PDF, it's page 117. It is the basic summary of the financial model. So if you do have questions like how much tax revenue are we, it's in that top line. I know you can't read it, but I do want to point council to that key table, because that table shows all the assumptions in the model over what ODES is expected to pay, where the town's revenue is coming, where the town's costs are assumed, and it shows at the very end that there is a net surplus annually. So if you ran this model out further past 10 years, it would, the surplus to the town would continue to increase as the revenue is now from the taxation is higher than the costs. Marginal.
Question
Yeah.
directed to the staff. Right now, we put 10,000 aside to kind of maintain the airport. Now they're kind of implying they want us to keep maintaining plus give them 10,000? Just clarity.
Yeah, so through your worship of Councillor King, right now, there is about 10,000. That includes the insurance costs and then approximately like 3,000 that we do for maintenance, which is, windsock and snow removal and sweeping of the place. So 10,000 is about right, but 6,000 or 7,000 goes right into insurance. If that helps. Yes, I think Mr. Underwood indicated with each phase, the model has incorporated the town provide 10,000 as a kickstart to that
Plus
phase.
continue maintaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 10,000 I think is continuous, and then there's the one-time 10,000 kick-ins at each phase, but it's just a one-time 10. So
Here's the 10, but it's also includes, you gotta keep maintaining it on top of it.
that's correct. Yeah, the 10,000 would be continuous.
Yep.
So can I assume that the shortest amount of time to get to phase 7 would be 10 years? Does that make sense? Or is that sort of up in the air? It sort of depends on, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that depends on momentum.
yeah.
And people that are, owning a plane and wanting to invest that level of money in their own hangar in Osoyoos, there might be a lot of them. I know there's some that exist in this town, but whether or not there's enough to fill all those hangars in 10 years or not, I think that's for the market and for ODES to try and market.
So wouldn't it make sense if you were having a hangar there that you would want to wait until you had fuel available? Or is that like, then the fuel doesn't come in till, I've forgotten which phase,
Yeah.
the servicing. So would it be more difficult to have somebody use a hangar when there was no servicing available?
Yeah, so I guess the two-part, fuel is in phase 2, so it is only the first 3 hangars would be there without fuel. I know they have fuel around. Obviously, there's no fuel there now, and there is some airplanes there, so I don't think it would be a deterrent to the first 3, but I do think they would be much happier once, and it was probably easier to market once it is there.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a great presentation, and finally they see something really substantial. It's exciting to me. With the owners willing to build the first 3, does that include infrastructure? Or OD's got to find money to put infrastructure, then they build the Quonset.
Yeah, so in the first phase, luckily the infrastructure is very minor, which is why we chose to put the first phase there. The servicing is right at that building boundary, so the actual servicing cost and the power is right at that building boundary. So it's almost, yeah, it's lucky. It was planned that way. The first phase is the most economical one to do from ODES, but it gets that amenity of water. It lets you start having more events. And that is it. It is is if someone's managing this airport and they're able to host events or do things that generate revenue, that's the point. And or to bring more people to town. Like that's the benefit that the society would bring to this airport is that spinoff.
So then Odes would build a washroom. I find your numbers very low for a washroom because we've been dealing with them in town. And this don't even put one wall up.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a washroom in a hangar building. It's not your park grade washroom that we do downtown. But I do know the feeling.
So other people could use that washroom even though it belongs to, say, number one hangar?
Yeah, the way it's intended is amenity, so it's an exterior entrance to, yeah, but within the fenced off compound of the airport. So it would be an airport user using it. It wouldn't be just open to the traveling public.
Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment. I know I talked with Rob before. One of my friends is a pilot in Vancouver and he has a plane and he talks about coming up here. And basically his thing is, well, as soon as someone builds the first one, then they know there's other ones, then they feel comfortable. So I think once, just like the old ball field, if you build it, they will come. I think that's kind of the process you're looking at.
100%.
Okay, are there any other questions or, yeah, go ahead.
There used to be a road going through this property. Has that been done away with?
You can see just to the south of the runway where there's that gravel strip's been extended to the edge of a road. That road still exists. We were working with the Ministry of Transportation to try and not only close that road, but close it as it parallels where we wanted to do all those hangars, because key to our hangar ability construction is closing that road. In the end, the ministry was okay with us closing the road to the south of the airport, but not to the west. So finishing that assignment became not worth it because we don't need the length at this time, or really probably any time in the future or the near future, to have the runway much longer to increase the size of the plane that we can handle. So closing that road became not a priority.
Okay, so go ahead.
I want to comment here. And thank you, Mr. Underwood, for your presentation. I think one of the important points is here is this is a document that kind of updates, the previous document, which I believe were 2005, 2006, when they did the original servicing on that property, and some ideas of what could happen down the road. And I think as we, as council, occasionally fields interest in, economic interest in terms of, what could be built on that property. I think this does give us a good idea of what we can place, where we can place it. That it gives us a tool to for those interested parties to have that conversation and be like, well, there is space here, here's the space, and we're not building a 100,000 square foot warehouse, but there is some opportunity here from the aviation community to expand your services and relocate your aviation equipment and be able to perhaps even relocate here completely. I think this is a really good working document for council to working with Odes down the road here to ensure that we allow ourselves to have some flexibility, but understand that this does work, and we definitely know there's definitely been some interest in the last couple of years in terms of what can be done there. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Could one of these Quonset huts or hangars be used for repairs?
The study that we did was for recreational users to store or like own a hangar to have their plane in. I couldn't necessarily comment on whether or not we'd run one as a commercial business. That was not within the scope of the assignment to do that. Clearly, they are large enough that could be done, but I think that's a different decision on this use, whether or not this is recreational users or commercial. Those 7 lots that were created, if that's the right number, on Empire, I think that was the vision for some of them, was airport related commercial, and that's what they were originally kind of targeted to.
Okay, no other questions, concerns? Then there is a recommendation. There's a couple of options. And I'm wondering if anybody would like to move one of those as a recommendation. So the one that's recommended is that council direct administration to advertise for public input on the airport master plan and financial analysis. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Seconding. Any other concerns? All in, oh, go ahead, Councillor Chong.
Thank you. Just with some current usage with Wine Country Racing and some of the hobby planes, is there consideration for these groups for continued usage as these phases progress?
Yeah, you can see in the plan, the racing is touched on it in that it's assumed that halfway through the implementation of the plan that the racing would cease to happen on the airport. So the revenue from the racing stops halfway through. And the idea there was that people that are investing this level of money in building these hangars will want to expect to use them on any given weekend. So it was assumed that they wouldn't tolerate it being shut down for the racing events as part of the marketing for building the hangars.
So I believe the Wine Country Racing has a 1 year. Do they do a 1 or is it a 2-year contract with the town? So
Yeah, your worship, the last agreement was for 1 year, and one of the reasons I think that decision was made is as a previous council decision back in 2020, 2021, there was we were to look at potentially entering into a management agreement of the airport itself. So the whole intent, if all goes as planned, is an airport agreement to be presented to council for consideration to sign over the management of the airport, and then let them determine, what are the best things to operate on that airport. Is it Wine Country Racing, more events, or so that's the whole intent of the management agreements. They provide a lot more flexibility and expedite things that they can see opportunities on, because at this point the administration is not spending a ton of time on your airport, and that's one of the benefits of doing the management agreement, to get an enthusiastic group of people to do what they can with the property.
thank you very much. So we have, it's been moved and seconded that we go with the recommendation to advertise for public input on the airport master plan and financial analysis. I'll call a question. All in favor? Thank you very much. That's carried. So thank you, Mr. Underwood, and thank you for Odes to being here and making sure that we had this information. I think I can put this binder away for the moment, can I? Okay, I believe that next on our list is the development cost charge bylaw review. Am I correct? Okay. Well, I think they know that we have other things to do before they can jump in and start building. Okay, Mr. Garish, are you going to talk about this, please?
Just briefly, and simply to give an introduction to Mr. Underwood, recognizing that True has done most of the work, well, almost all of the work in relation to the DCC bylaw, but we did prepare a brief overview report for council's consideration. It highlighted some of the stuff in the front end of the bylaw, which I would argue is largely tied to legislation under the Local Government Act. But the key part is the technical appendix, which is going to update the various charges for the types of costs that the town is trying to recoup money on. And I'll pass it over to Steve to speak to that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Steve. Did you know that you were coming to talk at length on these two issues? Good.
Yeah, somehow I had the order. I was sitting in the stands preparing for this presentation, and then you said airport. I'm like, oh. So there we go. I do have to acknowledge Anthony on my team, who has done all the heavy lifting and preparing the technical appendix for this project. that, and preparing this presentation for which I have the benefit of giving. Anthony's just welcomed a new baby, so he couldn't be here to present this to you. So the timing didn't work out for him, but it works out for me because I had another one to do here anyway today. So,
A small report by comparison.
yeah, there's more slides on DCCs, unfortunately. So yeah, let's dive into it. You know, we have a DCC bylaw, so, you know, hopefully everyone understands what a DCC bylaw is for, but generally we're trying to collect money from growth to pay for projects that we identify are needed to support the growth. So it's basically creating a way to recover those costs for the components of projects that are required because we're growing. Generally, DCCs are charged either at building permit or subdivision. They usually follow an OCP, which has happened here. So the order is you do an OCP, and then we usually update water capital, sewer capital plans, and then those projects are used to inform DCCs. In preparing the technical appendix and or the bylaw, we try and follow the province's best practice guide. The province has to approve this bylaw when we're done. So we definitely have a few decisions to make, like the time frame that we're going to analyze the projects over, the areas in which we're going to include in or exclude from the bylaw, the projected use or housing growth that's going to occur within the time frame. And now we also have the ability to add things that we hadn't in the past, like solid waste. And in the future, there'll be what's called an amenity cost charge bylaw, where we can actually charge for amenities as well. None of that, the amenities aren't included in this presentation, so we haven't dove into that yet. So generally, what we do is we collect these funds, and then the projects are paid for by the municipality, and then the funds are the DCCs are collected. They go into our DCC kind of reserves, and then we often have to apply our own funds to make these projects happen, and then we can continue to collect as after the project's finished, as long as they were in the bylaw. We do correct the costs for these projects that are in the DCC bylaw for grant funding. Either often we can back correct them if we do it, get grant funding, like we can reduce the amount we contribute to them, or as in the case in the water treatment project that is in the DCC bylaw, we are already applying an assumed grant funding amount to it because, well, we know we need to seek grant funding for that. So we've already accounted for that in the DCCs. For this proposed bylaw, we've assumed a 10-year revolving program. So we basically are just looking at growth in the next 10 years and applying cost to those development units in the 10 years. This will be updated on a rolling 10-year average. It lets us keep it more accurate for what's actually happening and what's changing. For this bylaw, we've proposed municipal wide, which means we don't have any special areas. Every area of town has the same DCC applied to it. We've assumed a 1% assist factor, which is what council chose to do previously, which basically we have to apply a 1%. It's the minimum. Council can choose to increase our assist factor on all or any individual DCC that we want here, which would result in bringing the DCC down, which means the municipality would be assisting in paying those DCCs from general revenue. To come up with our population in the 10-year average, we used the housing needs assessment and it came up with unit projections or population projection for us of 1,107 new residents in 10 years. For that, we split, and you can see in this chart, we assume there'll be 63 accessory dwellings, there'll be 387 apartment buildings. So that's the unit breakdown that we assumed would happen as a result of this increase in population. Also below, you can see the assumed increases in commercial, institutional, industrial gross floor area that we also assumed would happen as related to that growth. In the water capital plan, we had several projects that we identified as DCC eligible, or at least a component of them was DCC eligible. In the technical appendix, they'd all be listed in what kind of percentage of each one is DCC eligible to be in there. But you can see here a lot of our trunk mains, at least a component of them need to be larger because of growth. And as we change them out in our asset management plan, we will be making them bigger, and we'll be looking for DCCs to pay for that incremental increase in their sizes. A key water project here too to point out is the surface treatment plant. You can see it listed as W16 fourth from the top. That one project by itself represents 50% of the proposed DCC. So like you'll see that our water DCCs are higher than say our sewer by almost a factor of 50%, and it's all because of that one project. Similar with sanitary, we did go through the entire sanitary capital plan and again identify any project that was triggered by growth. And these are the ones that we identified. And a lot of them are around treatment upgrades. Obviously, the treatment plant's working now, we're in component, but as we grow, incremental upgrades have to be done, and those are DCC eligible projects. We don't have a stormwater master plan in town. We did resurrect a old plan that we had in the 2007, 2008 era where we were doing treatment projects on all the town stormwater outfalls. That project seems to have kind of fallen by the wayside, but we did update the cost estimates for all the outfalls that don't currently have treatment. Most of the main ones were done as part of that project 10 or 15 years ago, but we did add a new project at all the other outfalls that could benefit from treatment before it goes to the lake. And we did include a stormwater master drainage plan. Obviously, when that plan is completed, if new projects are identified that are DCC eligible, this DCC bylaw can be updated to include those projects. We are in this year's budget doing a new upgrade to the master transportation plan, but we do have lots of projects in the current queue or in the planning stage in the 10-year capital plan, and several of them are DCC eligible. So we did take all of these roads that we assume will be in the master transportation plan that again can be updated when that plan's finished, but we computed a DCC eligibility for all of these projects as well. We did work with parks to come up with a significant list of parks projects, and the active transportation plan, anything that was multi-use pathway style projects aren't in roads, they're in parks. So we were able to generate a significant list of parks projects, including several of these pathways, and a component of all of them were DCC eligible. Hopefully we can read this. I've tried to make the right-hand column, which is the totals, kind of legible at this scale, but this is a comparison of what we're proposing as the new DCCs to the 2016 DCCs, I guess we can call it old DCCs, the current DCCs. So what we're seeing for an accessory dwelling, the increase from currently per unit is 6,500, and now it's proposed to be 19,400. It is important to recognize that while our master plans are current, our cost estimates are current, and inflation since 2020 has been significant. So when you look at other people's DCCs, try not to look at DCCs that were pre-COVID, because the numbers are all off by more than half just out of the gate. So, 100% increase in these would probably be low for just measuring to inflation. So we're going to go from 6 to 19. It has gone up, but it's not maybe as significant as it seems. So is there a question? Yes.
Thank you. When were the DCCs last updated? So example, the accessory dwelling at 6,557. When was that implemented initially?
2016. Yeah, so
Okay.
all your current DCCs are based on cost estimates and projects identified in the technical appendix of 2016. You should have updated them at least once, like 2021, like every 5 years would maybe be a minimum for this, but especially after a time of peak inflation, an update would have been very prudent.
I think it was because we were smack in the middle of a pandemic at that point, and that's probably why it wasn't done. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, like, I remember discussing this with planning back then. It's like, well, you're doing an OCP. The best time to do this is after an OCP, not right before one, because we end up just updating it anyway. So it does, we do come up with excuses, but we do need to be diligent at even interim updates, like just updating we call them like minor updates, where we just update the cost estimates, recompute these, and then reapply them, so that we're maybe not doing a full blown rehab like we are here, but we're doing interim updates. And that's just to try and catch that inflation, because we're not allowed to build inflation into these numbers, which is frustrating. I would prefer if we could even just index these to inflation, and so it would be simpler than having to rewrite the bylaw every time.
Yep.
In your chart, if I was to build a new home and put a basement suite in, do I just get charged a single detached dwelling DDC? Or do I get kind of part of both?
You have so if you build, so yeah, so on a vacant lot that hadn't paid DCCs before, so it's like all new. So you're building a new home, that's a single family detached dwelling DCC, and then if you put a secondary suite in it, that's a secondary suite DCC.
And they apply at the same time, you gotta pay both.
Because you're building 2 units. Yep. Similarly, these are the proposed commercial, industrial, institutional rates, and also here is what we call a tourist accommodation unit rate, which is proposed. Commercial and industrial and institutional are paid for by the square meter or square foot, like by the area of the building built, whereas tourist accommodation unit is proposed to be built or built by the unit each. So a hotel room pays $7,284 per hotel room. This slide attempts to show where these proposed rates are relative to your Okanagan peers. We tried to find peers that have updated their DCC bylaw since COVID, and that turned out to be easy. Everyone recognized the problem. And if you look at these dates, there's 2023, 2024, and 2025. I did leave Oliver on here to show you what your immediate neighbor is, and they're significantly lower, but look at the date is 2020, and their technical appendix was prepared pre-COVID. And so their rates are missing that hyperinflation period that we just went through, and you can see why that brings the average of this down. 32,000 is, when you look at it in this chart, it isn't that bad. It scared me when we first computed the number, and until I saw this chart, I calmed down. But yeah, I thought it seemed high, but a lot of that is all of our new projects that are in our master plans, and this is the reality of what things are costing today. So I have these charts for several of the units. to try and see where you sit and give the council always does have the choice of trying to lower that number to be more competitive if that's how council chose to be. It is harder to increase the number, but definitely this is something that if council wanted to provide some input on, we could propose a higher assist factor than 1% on any single one of these things.
Do you have a comparison chart for commercial and industrial?
So here's commercial. Definitely we're on the higher side of some of these bars. We did really want to see if we could figure out how Penticton got there. If I go back to their single family, how Penticton got their single family so low, yet are so comparative in commercial. We haven't given how they computed their numbers to see how they did it. There may be an assist factor sitting there for this reason for them for single family. I can't speak to that yet. But so there's commercial. We're definitely on the high side. And industrial, I'd say we're right in the pack there.
As a follow-up, do we have a calculation as to what percentage commercial contributes to DCCs and industrial? Like, do we have a pie chart of that?
When you you look at the a growth projection, like we assumed that commercial there was the equivalent of 79 people, so they would have that, like of the 1,100 that are coming or in the growth, say 1,200 total when you include the equivalent from the commercial industrial, they're 79 divided by 1,200. That would be the percentage is kind of what we think is coming from commercial. So where we're at now is the technical appendix is prepared, the bylaw draft is prepared. Like this is our first presentation to council. What we usually do if we get acceptance of this in concept or is input from council that comes from this, we would take that and then hold some sort of open house, some sort of public consultation meeting where usually the people that turn up are the developers. So usually we meet with the developers to discuss what's shown here. We then would bring the feedback that we receive from the developers back to council. Might be just in the form of a report to council from what we heard. It might be another presentation depending on how much we heard. And then again, if council provides additional feedback, we can tweak this again, and then we submit to the province basically for approval to have to implement this bylaw. And we have to wait for their approval before we can start using it. Well, that is the end of my DCC presentation.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure that we all have concerns. Councillor King, you first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand we need to increase these. It's been pretty well 10 years and we are falling behind. I just find them a little aggressive, especially when we're trying to build affordable housing. So that's just my comment.
Well, my understanding is there's exemptions for DCCs for affordable housing. I may have misread that somewhere or made that up, but if here, criteria for waiving or reducing a DCC under section 563, not-for-profit rental housing, for-profit affordable rental housing, subdivision small lots, yada, yada, yada.
Sure, I can take that one. So it's set out under legislation, and my understanding is the council would have to establish the DCCs first, and then somebody who qualifies would have to pay them, but they could also at the same time submit a request for council to either reduce or outright waive the DCC charge, and that would come before you as a council for discretionary approval or not, as the case may be.
Well, that makes sense. Did you have anything else? No.
Sure, but Council Puerto Rico was second
Okay.
in line, so I don't want to
Oh.
count the queue.
Well, and that's why I checked. Okay.
That's back, I got a few too.
All right.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
And through you, and we'll take advantage of having both of you here. I know back in September, we had conversations with the former Minister of Municipal Affairs, and one of the concerns federally at the time was, as the provinces are renewing their grants, was the feds have hinted at a preference right now of pausing or eliminating the reduction or increases in DCCs. It kind of being the sticking point. I know BC has been pretty adamant that, you know, they have concerns with that limit because of the fact that due to the inflation costs that we're seeing and the increases that we're seeing in the demand on services. I guess my concern is at one point, you know, we do know that our DCCs have been relatively low in the past and haven't caught up the last 10 years. And now we're getting hit with, you know, significant infrastructure requirements. And is there a concern of us kind of handcuffing ourselves if the feds all of a sudden come around with grant money and, well, you increase your DCCs and they're no longer interested in funding those projects because of DCC increases? I know the province has been going back to the feds to have that conversation. Regardless of the change of government, both kind of indicated that there would be, obviously, and we know municipalities that have taken really good advantage of DCCs to help fund their growth, and more than double. And looking at some of the larger municipalities right now, they're seeing building booms in BC more than double, if not triple, what's being proposed here. But being in a position where we can't obtain some of significant grant funding as a result of our DCC increases, I'm just wondering if there's any concern in that. Right now, obviously, lots of things have changed in the last couple of months, but does that put us in a scenario right now? I mean, do you know ACCs are an option, and that's been looked at, I think, afterwards once the DCCs are approved. I know we had a conversation with the minister at the time of, well, do the feds care about ACCs? And the comment was, they don't care. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity, if not now, obviously later, is stirring some of that shift to funding those projects directly as amenity cost charges versus the development cost charge to kind of appease the feds, if that was the case. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Definitely, it's not an option to fund a water project as an amenity cost charge. So like the amenity cost charge is for different things. So that wouldn't be a way of hiding it. But I understand your concern. I've heard it, but I honestly get not, I guess, dialed into the political climate enough to know. But definitely, you're not proposing anything that's wildly higher than any of your neighbors. You are just keeping up with what's required, and you are trying to lower the burden on your current taxpayers, which is, you know, the goal here. And that's why DCCs exist.
If I could add to that too, I mean, my understanding, at least from the planning perspective, is the province is trying to dissuade local governments from negotiating at rezoning stage and extracting as contributions informally some of these required upgrades, either to amenities or hard infrastructure. And yes, you're correct. I've put this emphasis on the DCC bylaws as a transparent, upfront way to do it. And now we're getting that pushback from the feds. And I'm not privy to the discussions at the provincial level as to how they're resolving that, but I know it is a concern and that's something they're trying to sort out so it doesn't impact the growth that I think both levels of government want to see happen. So.
Where are we at? Councillor Chong, are you next?
Yeah. I like to see the commercial DCCs be drastically lowered. I think in this current tumultuous economic climate, it would be prudent to try to support as much new business and commercial build as possible. So could you bring up that bar graph again? Yeah, commercial, please. Yeah, so with just looking at that bar graph, we're pretty much third highest and above median. I mean, if it's possible, we can get around the 50 to 70 range per meter squared. I'd be a lot more comfortable with that. I don't know what the wishes of the rest of council is, but yeah.
Is that the only one that you're concerned about, the only area? Or, I mean, are we talking housing? because Jim mentioned that. And
Yeah.
so are we looking at all of them, or that's just specifically the one that you're most
So
concerned
the
with?
rationale is when you look at the total contributions of DCC money as a whole, um, from the previous chart, it seems like commercial would make up roughly about 10-ish%. But even that number is off because I mean commercial square footage for size versus residential is going to be different, so it's hard to calculate that out. So by reducing the DCC commercial DCCs, the net impact on the total DCC fund would be fairly muted. Of course, a reduction is still a reduction, but comparatively speaking, I feel the net benefit from having a reduced commercial DCC is just much higher as to the loss opportunity cost from having a higher DCC for commercial. And from there, by having one of the lower commercial DCCs in the valley, and also one of the lowest commercial property tax multipliers, we position ourselves as an area that is welcoming business into Osoyoos, and that allows us to grow a community further with potentially more industry. The industrial DCCs were pretty much kind of we're a little above median, but the issue is if we take Lake Country out of that calculation, I would assume median drops quite a bit. So, I mean, we could also look into reducing industrial DCC, but my understanding is our total land that's zoned for industrial is also quite limited as well. So it wouldn't really, the limiting factor there is land, not DCC. So in terms of commercial, I feel that it would have a larger net impact. And who knows, with the successful STR program, now we have increase in housing supply. So they all feed in together. It's like we have a strategic goal and vision or something.
Okay, thank you. I personally think, lowering the burden on ordinary taxpayers has to be paramount. Go ahead, Councillor
Yeah, I
King,
can
and then
support
Councillor
lowering it.
Miller.
I just think you're going a little too low. I think we should be around the medium, maybe just around 80. Instead of you're talking 50 or 55, you'd put us right at the second lowest.
Well, to clarify, is that a range between 50 to 70 and see where we're amenable and look at the financial projections from whatever cost recovery and et cetera. But yes.
Thank you, Bishop. I guess one of the big concerns here is understanding that we're landlocked. We only have so much land. You look at almost every one of those examples, with the exception, I'd say, maybe Peachland, but they can go up into the hills. Every one of those municipalities has a pretty good supply of vacant land right now that they could turn over tomorrow. We don't. Our land is limited in what we can do, both residentially. There is no abundance of, we're not like municipalities like Northern BC, where I've got someone to be able to push out 2,000 acres of municipal land that we could sell off tomorrow for profit, or develop for profit. We are in a unique situation that, we're landlocked by ALR land around us, a large lake, indigenous land, parkland. We really don't have a whole lot of land to play with, and living and handcuffing ourselves in terms of the fees. And we, some of these fees are balanced out, or misbalance themselves. We look at obviously Lake Country and on the industrial side where they've taken that big advantage, but they also have no problem filling industrial land in Lake Country. They've got a pretty good large amount of development happening out there in industrial land and commercial land. I don't know if we want to handcuff ourselves the fact that, for what it is on the commercial side, but in all our aspects in all our land, that we handcuff ourselves to try and be lower, and only to compete and develop what little land we actually do have left now.
Agreed. Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree. I think that our land's pretty valuable here. We don't have much of it, as we're very small, kind of with nowhere to go, and it's valuable land, and we should sell as that.
Mayor Worship, thank you. Just a question through to Mr. Garish. only because I'm not completely familiar on the DCC side. Area A land serviced by the town of Vesuvius cannot have a DCC charge, can they, or are they? For the services they provide, like, do we charge, or is it just a connection fee?
Yeah, I'm inclined to say your DCC bylaw only applies within municipal
Boundaries.
boundaries, and you'd have to collect any charges similar to a DCC through your fees for Area A users, off the top of my head, but yeah.
Good point. Can we
Would
do
rate-
that or?
Yeah, could that rate, and like, I'm not sure if there's a way to either collect it or increase it so that the fees align, obviously, that if you're developing a property that we're servicing, at least on the water side, or if it was in case of sewer side in Area A, that there'd be a fee that would be comparable to a DCC, fee in terms of plus the connection of that service. And I'm just not sure if that's something that's happened in the past or if that's an opportunity moving forward.
You do have a separate connection fee for sewer services outside the town boundary, and it would be worth looking back at that to make sure it's in somewhat alignment with this.
Mhm.
But no, your triggers are subdivision or building permit. And for this bylaw, we're actually proposing to move everything to building permit because of the secondary suites and so on. We don't know what's going to be in them. So basically, yeah, you don't have the jurisdiction to issue permits outside of your boundary or subdivisions outside your boundaries. You wouldn't have a tool to collect them.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add or question? Go ahead.
Well, I guess we never really come up with consensus, what would be a happy number on the commercial, whether we agree to lower it or leave it, or come up with a happy medium number to move forward with.
Through your worship, I mean, one of the things council can do is we are going through consultation here after this, if council approves. And maybe that's one of the things that administration presents back to you, is once we hear from the public, then you have potentially more of a wholesome picture from which to base a decision. Or you can do is you're talking about is changing them now. I was just providing that additional option. This process has just begun. It's going to be advertised, kind of some open houses, and then it will be coming back to you for ultimate approval.
But I guess if we lowered it now, you're still gonna take it to the public, look for feedback, but I guess it'd be harder to raise it, sort of, if they come back, yeah.
Go ahead.
Like we know what's going to happen when we put these numbers out for public input, right? Like this is going to be essentially like a bloodbath. And I agree with the rationale and I agree with all the math. I think we just need to be very cautious and careful as to how we present the information. Not censoring, and I don't mean censorship. We need to be fully transparent as to the calculations, as the comparisons, as to the complete rationale. Because this is, 40% increase in property taxes. Well, these numbers are significantly higher, which is also why I hate percentages. But I think I would just caution staff, just take those into consideration. But no, I still stand firm with reducing the commercial DCCs. One of the biggest tools we have as council is the ability to rezone. And even though we are landlocked and we don't have the intent of expanding boundaries, we still have tools in our toolbox to encourage more commercial land development. There was one proposed condo that had the bottom floor was all commercial and then had 3 floors that were residential. It was across from Nesters. That never came into fruition, but these are the type of building that check all the boxes for potentially affordable housing, but also increasing local business into Vesuvius. So, if we can do, I just think it's if we can do anything to help sweeten the pot, then I think we should.
And I'm just going to put this out there. I agree, Councillor Chung. I also think that this whole report is presented for a reason. There's lots of information in there. There's lots of reasons why. The suggested numbers have been put in there. And I think if we're going to get some public input on this, what we need is to present something. If it's an open meeting, if it's a survey that's being sent out, we need to have the information there of all of the things that we've brought up today and say, we haven't changed this any or lowered anything right now because we want to see what the input is first, and then we can lower it a little bit. And I think that would be a better way of doing it. Put it out there, get the information, and then if there's enough people that say agree with the commercial lowering, then we can do it. But I'd hate to do it now and then find out that, you know what, we've lowered it too much and we should have kept it higher. So that's just only my thought. Go ahead, Councillor King.
I kind of talking against, I support Councillor Chong. I just don't like how low he wants it, because I think if it was lower and you presented to the public, it would be an easier sell. We're already kind of in the middle or below the medium. We'd make an easier sell when you go to the public than looking at it now. They'll scream at it. How come we're third highest when you could be in the medium at percent?
Go ahead, Steve.
I've done several of these open houses in my career, and I can't remember a member of the public coming to any of them. The DCC bylaw is not usually something that the public is too concerned with, because it is the cost of doing development in town. This is what the cost for development, we're passing the cost to the developer, is the way it's seen. And so in my experience, the people that show up are the developers. Like, they'll drive up here from Vancouver to talk to us about this, but we won't get many generally. And you have a better read on your demographics here than me, but this isn't something that's usually heavily debated, because it is us seen as passing a cost from the taxpayer, from your current taxpayers, on to developers, and it's the developers that are usually the ones that have the concerns.
And we do have a lot of people that say, why aren't you doing this? The developers are getting away with murder and they don't pay enough. So I can see, and if the local residents know that there's a higher burden on the developers rather than them for funding these things, a lower burden on taxpayers is probably a selling point for citizens. Go ahead, Zach.
Thank you, Rick. Just to kind of echo those comments too. I think part of the conversation over the last couple of years, as we've tried to really pull apart our infrastructure issues and concerns, is the comment that we get quite often, which is, why aren't DCCs and developers paying for this? And well, here's the reality: is our rates haven't changed since 2016. They haven't caught up to the issues that we're facing today. We haven't had the activity to help boost that further. So, you'd love to say, yeah, DCC's paid for all this, but the reality is they aren't, because the rates aren't there to keep up to the inflation and the cost that we need and the services that we require. It'd be different if we were building 500,000 units a year to go and keep up with this, and some big investment. But the rates, for the last at least 9 years have been, haven't caught up to the cost of us doing business and us being able to operate, and us to be able to support the long-term servicing and infrastructure requirements that we need. So changing that conversation is, well, here's the fix is DCCs need to increase. If there's an opportunity that comes up there, and for us to look at a golden opportunity for the community in terms of whether that be a commercial property, then that's a conversation that we have when that opportunity comes available. But that was a comment earlier. We do know things such as our commercial tax rate is about a quarter of what it is in other municipalities in the region that we've talked to. That, how do you guys keep your tax multiplier at a 1.7? We're a 6+. Those are conversations that we have. It's not just well, what's your DCC cost or what's your property tax rate cost. There's a lot of things that come into the equation as to where someone going to go build, develop, and operate a business, or bring in the development to the community that's going to provide housing that we need. Those are conversations that have a big picture conversation in terms of where do we go from here. And so, right now I'd suggest that we keep the rates at here. We go to public feedback and we go from there. And if we find that we're in a situation, and as we found in the last time we had a conversation on RACH, which was on the STR side, that 750 figure was kind of like an ouch, that seems awfully high. And then you start looking at the other municipalities, and they were just beginning that catch up phase themselves, where their 250 cost is now 500 or 700. Realizing the true cost of us doing business and how to operate is what's kind of holding us back in terms of moving forward here. So I suggest we keep these at these rates for now. We go to the feedback. We gives us some time to look at, even outside the region. I've looked at a couple here that, where you're seeing good development progress right now, and these rates are still quite low compared to where those communities are. So I think we'd be reflective of that as we go ahead.
Go ahead.
Right, and I echo all of your statements. Like I don't feel any need to touch residential DCCs as proposed. I think it's we have to make up for a lot of lost time and significant infrastructure deficits. And frankly speaking, the residential DCCs are going to be the largest contributor, right? Again, like the commercial DCCs are going to be contributing around that 10%, if not lower. So when you look at the net impact on the funding of these projects, lowering the commercial DCCs are not going to have this like nearly the same impact as the residential DCCs. But again, like I don't want to change any of the residential DCCs. It's just I think it sends the message that Assyrius is open for business when we have a commercial DCC that is either median or slightly below. So maybe around that 80 range, if that pleases Councillor King a bit better.
So is somebody willing to use one of the options and make a recommendation? Go ahead.
Hold on, I need to read the options.
So it's 1, 2, or 3.
It's thank you, Your Worship. Could I do an option that the Town of Assyrius Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 1394 be initiated with the amendment of commercial DCCs being reduced to 85 as per that bar graph? However the math works out.
So from 100 to 85. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Because median was what, 86.39 or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to this? All in favor? Against? Okay, so that has carried. So it's the motion is, Mr. Underwood, will you change that in there? Is that your job? No, or is that staff's job to change that amount in the commercial? So we can present it. And do we need also to have a motion that we would go through with a public information meeting as was suggested? Do you need a separate motion for that? Yeah.
And just to specify, because commercial is broken down to A and B where there's tourist accommodation unit, I'm okay with a DCC increase on that one. I'm referring specifically to commercial 2B, so all other commercial uses, which is charged per meter squared. So that's an increase from 28.92 to the proposed 110.94. I would like the proposed to be just a flat 85. If that makes sense.
Was that in the
So-
motion?
It is in the motion, but I think we might need to specify it because commercial, now that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, so the problem is the motion's already passed.
Okay.
And so I guess there's a couple options. I think there can be an amendment, clarification, or I don't know how we do it here with a revote. So it's
Because the motion, the only commercial uses that's calculated by per meter squared footage is only the all other commercial uses. So I think the motion still stands. I think it's fine too, but I was just
Okay,
detail oriented.
is that okay? Go
Just
ahead.
one question, Mr. Arnold. What's the timeline with this moving forward?
Well, our heavy lifting is done. It's now scheduling a public meeting and just working through those processes. So that, you know, ideally we work through all that before summer. And then get this to the inspector of municipalities by summer.
A next motion to move forward with this?
A motion to have a public
Sorry.
meeting? Am I correct or not?
No, it's okay, your worship. We've taken the original motion and it was just added. We've added that commercial part to it. So it's okay. Oh, and then, yeah,
So-
no,
Do we need a motion to say
Yeah.
that we will have a public meeting?
yes, we can move forward with that one.
Okay, could we have, thank you. Counselor King, Counselor Bennett, all in favor. Thank you very much. So that will be set up. All right, we finished with this one. So we will move on to Mr. Garish. You're going to talk about on page 916 the several amendment bylaws be initiated.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, please.
Sure, I'll just wait for the PowerPoint to come up. All right, so I'm cognizant of time and I don't want to belabor some of these because I think they are fairly minor. It's what I would normally consider housekeeping, but we're not technically supposed to call it housekeeping anymore. So I apologize if I race through some of these pretty quick, but I'm happy to take questions at the end. And I did want to start with some quick background because, of course, these are issues that we're bringing forward through day-to-day use of the bylaws. And we get various applications coming forward, questions, et cetera. And of course, as council may be aware, from the planning department's perspective, these are the four main bylaws that we use when we deal with the public or developments, et cetera. So OCP, zoning, subdivision servicing, and land use procedures. Coincidentally, those are also the bylaws that we're seeking direction on in terms of the amendments today. And I'll start with the OCP and I'll jump right into it. So as council is aware, as a municipality, you can do development permit area designations. And the town currently has 5 DPs for form and character, which is how buildings look, and then also for environmental protection, riparian and environmentally sensitive areas. Each of these DP areas, whether it's form and character or environmental protection, have exemptions. These exemptions are varied. They speak to interior alteration, signage, natural restoration, and also utilities, which I've put an asterisk on because that's one of the ones we're seeking direction on. The current exemption for the environmental DPs speaks to repair maintenance of municipal works by the town or its authorized agents. And it also has a qualifier, or sorry, it has a list of 2 references to parks and trails, but then also a qualifier that speaks to as long as consideration has been given for ecosystem functions and their cycles consideration. So we flag that. Presents challenges for us at a staff level because of course not all infrastructure or utilities may be municipal. As you're aware, there is other entities that we feel this exemption was probably intended to address, but because of the reference to municipal, inserts some ambiguity into it. And also the fact that it only lists parks and trails. I mean, there's 2 ways of looking at that: either remove parks and trails or provide a more comprehensive list of what is meant by this utilities exemption. And then the last part of the current exemption, where it speaks to the consideration part, we're challenged by that one as well at a staff level because we're not sure what the obligation is after having considered a development on an ecosystem, if that exemption no longer applies once it's been considered, or having considered it and a person has an opinion that there may be a detrimental impact, that then the exemption doesn't apply. So it's not the best wording for us going forward, dealing with some of the works that we've been confronted with. So we've put forward a proposed amendment for council's consideration. We're proposing to itemize what is meant by utility works. So sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water, natural gas, cable, electrical, telecommunications, road, parkland, and trails which as council can see, not all of these are municipal. And then also to remove that reference to having considered environmental impacts, because we don't honestly know what that means. Second part of the OCP amendments is the urban containment boundary. So as council will recall, back in January, I believe we were before you at committee in relation to the Meadowlark development. And it was a reconsideration request in relation to some ALC conditions. And we noted at that time that a parcel the commission had previously asked to see removed from the containment boundary was still within it. And that was part of their conditions of approval for Meadowlark. So we needed to address that. And so with this suite of amendments, we're proposing to remove the parcel, which is found here. So we're proposing a new urban containment boundary, which would have this parcel excluded from it. And then that would satisfy the Land Commission's conditions of approval for Meadowlark. And you can see here's an aerial image of it. So quite clearly still being used for agricultural purposes. We can understand the Commission's concern here. Other proposed OCP amendments relate to the 2024 municipal boundary expansion. So the two parcels that were brought in off of Highway 3 being 4295 and 4303. So all of the map schedules to the OCP currently do not show these parcels as being within the municipal boundary. They're still shown as being within Area A. So we want to update those maps, show these two parcels, and make sure that they are adequately addressed by that particular map schedule. And I think the most consequential one here would be the preferred land use designations going forward. So we're proposing that, again, recognizing that these are ag zoned in the ALR, used for agricultural purposes, that the agricultural designation under the town's OCP is probably the most appropriate designation. It's also consistent with their current designation under the electoral area A OCP bylaw, which still applies until council makes this change. I'm going to jump into the zoning bylaw now. So this is an issue that's come up through a number of different business license applications that we've been trying to assess at a staff level, and situations along Main Street. And I'll show you the map that we've prepared for consideration here. But obviously the historic or quote unquote historic downtown area developed many decades ago, most likely. A lot of parcels with 100% coverage, not much in the way of on-site parking, but significant off-site parking on Highway 3. And as council is aware, there's already currently a downtown parking area within the OCP that speaks to reduced parking requirements for residential development, but it doesn't currently speak to commercial development. And this is a different view of the 4 blocks that we've put forward for consideration today. But of course, we're also open to suggestions from council on expanding or changing these blocks as they're proposed in the OCP. And so this is how it would look tentatively on the downtown parking exemption area. So the existing exemption for residential would be maintained. So for apartment buildings and townhouses, the reduction from 1.5 to 1 would carry forward. But we'd be introducing language into the zoning bylaw saying for that black dashed line area, which is those 4 blocks. Whoops, sorry, jumping the wrong way here. Shown here, and again, you can see here the parcel coverage issues, lack of on-site parking. That as long as there's no increase in floor area and there's no reduction in current available parking spaces, that if somebody's coming in for a business license, that we're not going to be trying to apply on-site vehicle parking issues, and hopefully will allow us to issue these business licenses in a more timely fashion and not have to deal with these parking plan issues in an area that we know simply is not capable of providing some on-site parking. Some considerations that we've highlighted for council's consideration as you consider this. Obviously, the footprint of this exemption area is one, but also introducing this exemption would impact the town's ability to do the cash in lieu contributions, which, if you recall from the zoning bylaw last year, we did have a discussion with council about increasing that cash in lieu contribution from $3,000 up to $10,000. So with the exemption in place, basically, unless there's a building permit issued for new floor area, that cash in lieu contribution probably will not be collected at business license stage. But we also recognize, again, I'm just reiterating some points here, the challenges due to the existing built form and 100% parcel coverage in a lot of these lots. And that's presenting a challenge for new businesses moving in. Jumping along, subdivision and development servicing bylaw, so another one we deal with when people are carving up their parcels to create new lots. It's been brought to our attention that there's essentially 2 sets of standard drawings available right now on the town's website. So standard drawings are basically what are used to inform requirements in relation to the design of roads, new sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, et cetera, so that developers understand what it is or what level of standard the town is expecting to see. And so what's currently in the bylaw is about 49 different drawings related to waterworks, sewer, stormwater, et cetera. As you can see here, your current subdivision bylaw dates to 1998, so not surprising that a lot of the plan or drawings within the bylaw also date to the mid-1990s. And I just thrown some examples up here in relation to a typical water service connection or a sewer service connection, and also a urban road design. And as you can see from the quality of the drawings, I mean, these are very typical from mid-1990s. We do, however, have the benefit of new standard drawings that True has prepared, and unfortunately Steve has left, but these newer drawings, I think total 66 altogether, deal with a lot of the same issues as the current drawings in terms of water, sewer, roads, et cetera. But there are 17 new ones, but more importantly, you can see here the quality of the drawings, certainly for reference purposes for developers, are a lot better than what's currently in the bylaw. Trying to remember what I was doing here. I think this is trying to show, and I appreciate the limitations of a PowerPoint may not make it readily evident, but I'm just trying to show the quality again between the current, I would assume hand-drawn or very rudimentary drawn, the standard drawings in the bylaw currently, which is the one that left, versus the more recent one, which I believe was prepared in 2012 at Wright. So just a higher quality plan, more of them, easier to use, et cetera. Another provision in the subdivision servicing bylaw that's been brought to our attention through a recent subdivision application is underground servicing. It speaks to having to provide certification from the providers of some of these underground services. So it speaks to West Kootenay Power, BC Tel, BC Gas, and cable television. We feel this presents a challenge because, of course, a lot of these companies have changed or morphed over the years, and some of the standards may not have kept up to date. So we're proposing to consolidate this into just a single reference to the underground standards of the jurisdiction, or sorry, the authority having jurisdiction, which we think is simpler and it's going to be easier for subdividers to meet. Of course, in going through the bylaw, we also picked up on a number of other things, which again, I think are very minor. But there's current application requirements for subdivisions in the subdivision servicing bylaw, whereas I think for all other land use application types, it's in the town's land use procedures bylaw. So we'd like to move them over for consistency purposes. And then also just update some references to outdated municipal act references and also town bylaws from the 1990s that no longer exist. And that's it in a nutshell. I apologize for the quickness of it, but I'm hopeful most of them are minor and there's not too many questions. But if there are questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garish. Yes, it was interesting to go through and look at a lot of the drawings, 2012, 2016, so on. I'll just check and see. I think it kind of makes sense to me. I don't have a concern. Is there anybody that has any questions of Mr. Garish? No? So is there somebody who would like to make a recommendation based on the following of the amendment bylaws be initiated? So it will, if we do a first, would it be a first reading or a first, second, and third reading? I wasn't quite sure. I'll wait and ask. Mr. Risling, are you looking at getting first, second, and third reading right now? No.
No, I can speak to this one really quickly.
Okay.
So before I went out for public consultation, and similar to some of the other bylaws you've seen today, we just wanted to bring it to council's attention at committee, see if you're comfortable with some of the amendments that we're proposing, and if you are, that we would then initiate the process to bring it back for first reading. So that would involve,
Okay.
the obligatory public consultation, probably newspaper ad, email notification, posting on the websites, agency referrals, collect all that information, and depending what we hear from the public, if it's substantial, I suspect you probably see us back at committee, but if there is no comment, I suspect you probably just see it at first reading at a future meeting, obviously in either scenario with an overview of what we heard from the public.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I was just looking at the draft versions, and there's a first and second time public hearing, third, and so I wasn't quite sure. Did you have something? Go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you. So that's been moved. Is there a seconder? Counselor Bennett is seconding that. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much. Did you have a question now?
No, this is good. No, another question. Your map 4 needs updating. Your museum's been moved from the location on the map.
So, thank you very much. Have we finished? Is there anything else, Mrs. Robinson, or? Okay, I'm just checking with that first, so terminate.
For termination.
to- Thank you very much. All in favor? All in favor of termination? Thank you. Wow,